I get asked a lot of questions about aviation in the comments of my videos. And even though I don't know much on some of these subjects, I'm going to attempt to answer 10 of your questions in this video. What's up everyone, I'm a private pilot and aviation enthusiast and this is Let's Go Aviate. Hi bud, very nice and interesting, but can you make a video for the bigger size gents? Yes, I mean, are not the average 70 to 80 kilogram. I mean, I always wanted to fly, but at 160 kilogram, not many options I know that is out there. So if we're talking light sport aircraft category, it's gotta be the Skyreach Bushcat. Absolute huge cabin, 49.5 inches wide. I'm not sure how high it is, but it's plenty high, powered by the Rotax 912 100 horsepower, so cheap to maintain, cheap to run. If you're looking for something less bushplaney and a lot faster, look at the Aero Product A22 or A32. Also powered by the 100 horsepower Rotax, cabin 50 inches wide, also plenty tall. If you need something with more horsepower, look at the KFA Safari, but the cockpit size or the width then reduces to 48 inches, but it can take the Rotax 914 or 915, but the maximum oil weight goes up to 750 kilograms. So it's not a light sport aircraft anymore, and you can't fly it with a sport or recreational pilot's license. You actually need a private pilot license to fly it. So what's a good replacement since they stopped making this engine? So this question was asked on my video about Rotax stopping production of the two-stroke 582. So to answer this, I always seem to keep coming back to the Yamaha Phaser. It's light engine, as light as the 582, but more horsepower, around 80 horsepower. It's four-stroke, but the problem with these engines is it's not an airplane engine, it's a snowmobile engine. So to get one, you would need to get a snowmobile to get the engine, and then you need to attach a gearbox to it because the engine turns way too fast for a propeller. So it's not a problem to get a gearbox, but you need a custom adapter to fit the gearbox to the engine, and that needs to be custom made. So there are some people who manufactures these adapter plates. One of them is Ben Karras, also an aviation YouTuber in the United States, but I do believe he's actually stopped manufacturing them now. So I'm not sure how one would go about getting one of these engines for your aircraft. The other option is a relatively new ultralight engine, the Aero Marine V2 Hybrid. So yes, I said hybrid, not hybrid. It's a two-cylinder V engine, four-stroke, puts out around 60 horsepower, so it's a little bit less. Also water-cooled, definitely an option I would consider as well. What higher horsepower engine would you recommend for an ultralight? I'm looking into purchasing or building a 103 ultralight, and the local area elevation is approaching 3000. So for that I would give the same answer as the previous question. Look at the Yamaha Phaser if you can actually get your hands on one of them. If not, and if you need more power, look at the Simonini V2. It's an Italian engine, two-stroke, weighs about the same as the 582, but more horsepower, actually almost 100 horsepower, so it's a great power to weight ratio package. Don't really know anything about them, but there is one flying in South Africa, powering a Bush Baby, the same plane I fly, so consider that as well. But for a more long-term solution, I would look at what the partnership between Yamaha and Shimeiwa will actually bring, because they recently designed a new airplane and a new engine, which I believe is going to be around 80 horsepower. They've not yet confirmed, but if that engine goes to market, I believe that will sort of become the de facto new engine for ultralights, which require more horsepower. Can you fly from Florida to Bahamas in a Bushplane? So can you, or are you allowed to? So my guess is you would need a private pilot license since it's an international flight. So you won't be able to do it with a recreational or sport pilot license. Depending on the regulations in the Bahamas, I know around here we're not allowed to fly into some of the bordering countries with a recreational pilot license, so you would need a private pilot license. So, and then what plane? Certified bushplane or experimental? Certified bushplane, private pilot license, I see no reason why you would not be able to do that. experimental though, that would again depend on the regulations in the Bahamas. Around here in Africa, we're not allowed to fly into some of the bordering countries with a non-type certified airplane. Some countries we are, some not, so it would depend on the regulations in the Bahamas. But is it possible though? Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, Fort Lauderdale, Miami to Nassau is, I think, less than 200 miles. You would probably need to land at an international airport in the Bahamas to clear customs. So you can't just fly to anyone directly before clearing customs. So you would need to be able to fly from Fort Lauderdale to Bahamas with enough reserve fuel left in the tank after you've landed. You also need to have enough reserve fuel to reach your alternate airfield. So let's say if you were to arrive over the Bahamas and you can't land there and you need to divert somewhere else, you need to have enough fuel left for that. So if there are other airfields in the Bahamas, it could be one of those, or it might be back at Fort Lauderdale. So assuming the airplane has the range to do that, absolutely, I see no reason why you would not be able to make that flight. And by the way, I know basically nothing about the aviation regulations in the US and the Bahamas, so thank you for making me do the homework on that one. So tell me, when it's gusty and you need to add speed to your final approach speed, how shall I compensate for that added energy? So I'm not sure if this is an honest question or if it's maybe a little bit passive-aggressive. This comment was left on my video on how to improve your landings, which is basically to approach at the correct speed. So that would be VREF or reference final approach speed, which is your stall speed in landing configuration multiplied by 1.3. But I see a lot of low-hour pilots adding a lot of extra speed to their final approach speed to make it safer, which doesn't make it safer, it makes it more dangerous. But there's almost this thing of adding 5 knots to the approach speed for your passenger, 5 knots for the wind, and an additional 5 knots just for good measure. And if you do that, you're going to be approaching way too fast, and you're going to float forever, bounce, and balloon the landing. So in the video I said to never add any speed to your final approach speed unless it's very gusty. Then you should increase your final approach speed. And that's what this comment was aimed at. And I stick with what I said in the video, but to give a little bit more additional information. The reason why I said that is when you approach in extremely gusty conditions, you would typically use less flaps. So remember, your final approach speed is your stall speed in landing configuration multiplied by 1.3. But if you use less flaps, that configuration, your stall speed is higher than with full flaps. So taking in that speed multiplied by 1.3, this approach speed is faster than you would have used when you used more flaps. So that's why I said to do increase your approach speed when it's extremely gusty. Can I ask why you use miles per hour instead of knots? Another one of these questions. So knots is primarily a navigational unit. Aviation's origins are American, and if you don't believe me, ask my buddies Wilbur and Orville. Most older aircraft manufactured in the US will either be marked in miles per hour or both knots and miles per hour. My airplane's airspeed indicator is marked in miles per hour, so that's what I read. If you want to talk aviation, you need to be comfortable with imperial units, because we also use feet to measure altitude and vertical speed, not meters. And we use horsepower as a measure of an engine's power output, not kilowatts. Great content, thanks. What's your opinion on the X-Airhawk? So keeping in mind that I know absolutely nothing about these airplanes, here's my advice. It's got 3-axis controls, engine in front, what's not to like? If they made a tailwheel version, I'd probably be all over it. Matt on his YouTube channel, I believe, recently got an X-Air Hanneman, which I think is basically the same plane. So do go check that out. But it's a very light aircraft, so it will probably have spectacular performance with the Rotax 582. Except, wait, they don't make those anymore, do they? So if you want to get a new X-Air, you'd probably need to get a second-hand Rotax 582 or choose one of the other engine options. And looking at them, I gotta say I don't like any of these engines, except the 912, which is expensive for ultralight and way too heavy for most ultralights. So you'd probably end up with a nose-heavy airplane. I don't know. The HKS might be okay, it's 4-stroke. Don't know anything about these engines. Hey, nice video, thanks. How does one get permission to do this? So this was asked on my video where we landed on the mine dump. So firstly, yeah, you would absolutely need permission to do this. But secondly, the aviation regulations in South Africa is quite interesting. Other than for built-up areas, there's not anywhere that you're strictly prohibited from landing on, except public roads, which say strictly prohibit unless it's an emergency. So keep in mind that in South Africa, there's not a whole lot of government land. The vast majority of land in South Africa is private land. So same if you were to walk or drive into somebody's land, if you land there, you would need permission to do so. This isn't Canada, where the worst case scenario is the owner comes up to you and asks you to leave immediately. No, that is the best case scenario in South Africa. The worst case is you get shot. If not by the owner, then by the gang who's about to rob the owner.
Is he serious?
The other thing to keep in mind is insurance. If you were to damage your aircraft landing at the property without permission, you can bet your butt they're not going to pay out your claim. So, how do you get permission? The sad reality is you need to know the owner, or you need to know somebody who knows the owner who can give you permission to land there. And that's a really cool looking plane. I've seen that max takeoff weight is 450 kilogram. Is it with passengers? My dad's weight combined is around 230 kilogram. I wonder if I could fly my dad in such plane if I get it one day, or we would need something like Explorer. You could, if you can fit inside.
God, you can be so insensitive sometimes.
Ours is actually max all-up weight 600 kilograms. So most bush babies should be 500 or 550 kilograms. It was really only the very first ones that was 450 kilograms. And a lot of those has been upgraded by now to match the spec of the latest bush baby you can buy now. So the plane's empty weight is around 300 kilograms, and adding your 230 kilograms takes us up to 530. So it does leave some weight left to use for fuel, but at that weight it is never going to perform well. It is always going to be heavy unless you fly close to sea level. If not, then I would not recommend it. Another project in the pipeline, please do tell. Whenever I get within 10 feet of another aircraft, I get asked questions like this. I think this was asked on the video where I did my conversion on the Bushcat. Just because I fly another aircraft doesn't mean I'm going to sell the Bush Baby and get one of them. So no, I'm not looking. But on the other hand, I am always looking. Whatever qualities I do and don't have, the one thing I am not is a blind fanboy. Don't get me wrong, I love our Bush Baby. It's an awesome little aircraft, but it's got its faults, just like any other aircraft, and I don't care who says what on the matter. I think it's very narrow-minded to go through life not wanting any other aircraft than the one you have. And if you can't afford any other aircraft, that's fine, but it is not your wife. You are allowed to desire other aircraft and touch them, and even go home with them. Was that your question? Another project in the pipeline? Actually, yes, there is. I've answered 10 of your aviation questions. It's something a little bit different for this channel, so if you liked it, please hit like. And if you think it was stupid, dislike it, which will help me know if I should make another one of these videos in the future or not. Thanks for watching. Ciao.